Hey,
Hey,
we are live with David Marquez this evening. David went to the University of Iowa for grad school. That's right.
okay.
And he now teaches at Western Kentucky University. He recently was featured on the MSA digital panel, the online sculpture classroom. So go check that out. It's really good information that they provided there. And back in 2018, we actually got to have some really cool adventures while we were in Germany at Atelier House Helmsen. I'd probably slaughter that completely, but it was for the International Symposium of Metal Casting and 3D Printing. Um, Really great experience, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. Currently, we are now serving on the National Cast Iron Practices Conference Exhibition Committee, and he's doing a kick ass job of keeping us on track and getting a bunch of things done. So I can't wait to talk to him about a few things today. My burning question is, when were you introduced to metal casting?
Let's see. I guess my first metal castings was at Western Kentucky University, where I teach now.
Okay.
My my instructor Brent Oglesby, who's still teaching there, he's teaching ceramics now. Um, he introduced us to casting. I think we did ceramic shell, and I think it was new to him. I remember like we were doing our slip our ceramic shell mix or whatever the slurry. We were doing that over a 5 gallon bucket, so it was like and mixing it every day to keep it going in suspension and stuff like that. So that was a good trial. I don't think I made very good work back then. That's undergrad, so it's been a long while. That was in the 90s, 95 or something like that. I'm really horrible with dates. Um, he did have to bring in some people that did sand casting. I was really sort of excited about how little of resin went into, again, a 5 gallon bucket to mix
Right.
sand and do that. So that was pretty trippy. And then when I went to University of Iowa, this was a lot of refugee stuff from Julius Schmidt was there at University of Iowa,
Hmm.
but he'd moved on, retired. So I was under Tom April and Isabel Barbuza there, and we had Tony Sutowski as our tech.
Okay.
And I think Isabel and Tony are still there. Um, the and Tom, he's passed, but that was a great experience there because basically what I did, that gung ho attitude, I went into we had what is it called, a was it two trailer what is it, two trailers combo, basically, whatever, for our studios. That was our
Right.
studio, like two trailers sort of lined up together and zipped together. I went in over one of the summers and redid some of the rooms. We had a small gallery there, and I made basically that gallery twice the size.
Nice.
And I did a lot of the framing and stuff like that. The other students came in, next semester, and we finished it with drywall, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, Tony Sutowski and Isabel Barbuza, Tom April, came to me and said, we can't pay you for this. And I wasn't expecting to get paid or anything like that for doing it. And but we'll give you all the metal you want for the next semesters. And so that was that was a really big leap, and
Yeah.
it was bronze and aluminum. So like, that was a great experience right there. And what the fun part is, I had Isabel come back a while back to Western as I was teaching there, and she informed me that that they were already in the process of getting a new building, and they weren't going to be able to keep our gallery that was in our double wide trailers was my word. That double wide trailer, they weren't going to be able to keep that gallery and call it the gallery. So they were going to call it, they could get the space, but they were going to call it experimental media space or some sort of installation space to show, and they were going to keep the namesake of my armature gallery that I called it.
Nice.
And so that was really cool. I've really sort of been fortunate to have a lot of great experiences like that just sort of like set me on a path. Iron casting, that moved into moving from Iowa to, I was getting ready to move to Australia. My wife is from Australia, and so in the transition, we decided to stop and live in Tennessee for a while, which is where her parents or lived there at
Uh-huh.
that time. And just to sort of get them ready, because we were actually sort of, our plan was to move to Australia, get their house ready so they could move to Australia and
Wow.
do that. And everything didn't work out the way we planned. But as I was there, I taught at MTSU, and I started hanging out with Mike Baggerly more, and um, Jared Houghton and Kim Dummins, and we took a trip to Sloss Furnaces for one of those the weekend um, uh, mold making and iron casting
Mhm.
workshops, and did a couple of tours there and stuff like that. And it just kept building on and on and on. I went to Australia, came back again, started teaching here at Western. Brent Oglesby sort of called me and said that, I need somebody to fill my boots for about a semester or a couple semesters a year while I do this department head interim thing. And I said, sure. And we ended up moving back, and that 1 year turned into about 8 years. And then that was part time, and finally it turned into tenure track. So now I'm on the
Nice.
tenure track now. Still working on continuous materials and stuff like that, and then to move on up. But I did turn in my continuous materials and get it as an associate as the next step up, and then I think that's right. But anyway, I'm already one level in, and I'm still doing that stuff. So that's pretty cool.
So there's hope for a lowly adjunct.
Oh yeah, and like that was the thing I was told over and over again is that you're a part time or you're adjunct or whatever. I was at a part time position there, not adjunct, um, but I was at part time capacity for that 8 years, and I was told, well, you'll never get a job this job that and a part time never leaps into that tenure track position, and I knew of other people doing it, and so
Mhm.
don't ever let that get you down.
Right.
And for anybody out there thinking about moving up, there's always going to be positions available. There, people are moving in and out and stuff like that, and you just got to keep fighting the good fight until you get there. So it's doable. I did it.
What were y'all using the continuous iron furnace at Iowa? Because you said that was Julius Smith.
Yeah, we did mostly bronze and aluminum
Oh
at
wow.
that point. That really, I think there was a stigma there with some of the other faculty, and I think when they rehired, they maybe deliberately hired people that weren't as gung ho as. I would definitely love to have been a part of that to see, how he functioned and how
Mhm.
he ran a shop and stuff like that. I've heard all kinds of different
Yeah.
stories.
It's definitely a really cool lineage to be part of for
Yeah.
sure.
And
Cause
it was great. It was great meeting Aaron too.
oh,
I've
I
met him
bet.
at conferences multiple times, and even though I didn't know Julius, it was just
Mhm.
filling that part of the gap. I think that's the biggest part that I like about iron casting, especially, is that community that we have and that network we're finding. Like,
Mhm.
so
Yeah, Aaron's really doing some cool stuff with all of the CNC milling and everything
yeah,
in his molds. It's really
blueprints,
cool. So you've been to multiple residencies, including the sculpture trails. Tell us a little bit about that program and your experience there.
well, Sculpture Trails. I ran into Jerry Massey at a MSA Mid South Sculpture Alliance conference in Chattanooga, and I was, most of my training hadn't been sand casting as much as it had been investment casting and ceramic shell, and primarily investment casting is my I guess my go-to most of the
Hmm.
time as far as ease. Um, but anyway, I talked to Jerry and I said, is there any way to do? I had some complex forms. You've probably seen some of them on my website. The more complicated tubing that sort of bulbous shapes. Well, that tubing stuff gets pretty complex, and to do it in an
Right.
investment mold or even a ceramic shell, it could get pretty difficult
Hmm.
on a studio that's at a university and such, unless I break it down and weld them down into
Right.
parts. I wanted this sort of a continuous flow of that form on those forms. And so anyway, I explained that to Jerry what I was looking for, and he said you need to talk to Nathan Goodson. All right, so like I never met Nathan or know anything about it, and so like I signed up for 1 week slots or whatever for that next year, and met Nathan. Found out Nathan was like in grad school with Brent Oglesby, again my old sculpture professor. So that was like again that network sort of falls back in. So
Right.
I got to know all the old stories there, and then that was pretty cool. But Nathan showed me how what we were doing and basically building up one of his burnout molds, basically building sand resin around a wax form that's already gated up, just like you would for an
Hmm.
investment form. I don't know if you've seen, we will probably have seen this process at
Oh
least
yeah.
a hint because he's done it at Sloss Furnaces at the conference. Um, but watching him, him coaching me through doing that when I'm doing that for him, we burned it out. Everything worked fine. It was pretty amazing. That thing was hard as crap though to get out because and maybe that's my fault because I'm a bit of a I ran it pretty hard, so I like it tight. So anyway, so that worked out. That was an awesome experience. And after that, I went a couple times, and then I really, again, it was about the community that sort of like I saw there. And one thing that I told Jerry too, I said, what the conferences or what the interns residencies do is for us artists that we can't get all that work done by
Hmm.
ourselves.
Right.
uh, we need that support from each other and stuff like that, and being able to come there. And a lot of times I'm overachiever. I have molds ready when I get there and put them on the floor. Let's pour them. But at the same time, that you can't even that like having that as a resource for an artist is pretty amazing, especially the kind of work that we do. It's so labor intensive. And two, I'd never done enough iron casting. I've worked with um, hold on, McCreary, Joe McCreary,
Right.
and Heather, can't remember her last name, and Remy. That
Hmm.
was doing the workshops back at Sloss then. And like I said, I only got an inkling of what iron casting involves, and that was making molds and getting them and pouring them. As far as running a furnace and building a furnace, I've never done any of that. So I'm slowly learning all that. I still haven't braved it enough to go in and build my own or anything like that. I'm
I know I haven't either.
I'm over cautious too because I really love to see it happen at WKU, but also I see a lot of the risks involved with it, and I'm just I don't know,
Hmm.
apprehensive. I hate to say that, but like that's just me. I'm a little bit cautious there. So
Yeah, I know.
um,
I've relined a ton of them, but I haven't ever like built one from scratch.
I've got one sitting in the garage waiting for the lining and stuff like that to happen. So
Nice. Well, let me know when you want to fire it up
yeah,
because I'll come help for sure.
thanks, awesome. Um, but that finally led into like wanting to learn more and stuff there in with the iron casting community. Jim Wade, uh, Jerry, obviously, then running in with like the tying it to the UK crew and stuff like that.
Hmm.
With um, forgive me with the names, but just those peeps and sort of start hanging out with those, pouring metal with those, and it was just become this endless circle of like, okay, getting information from each point or whatever, and then finally deciding, okay, I'm going to build one, and then sort of like again that cautious sort of steps
Right.
in, but then falling into the on the board with trails has been pretty awesome, just being a part of that and seeing how it grows, and I'm just super impressive with with how Jerry, like his story of that was a big draw, coming home and telling his mom and dad, I want to build a sculpture park here. Take a property and make it into a sculpture park. That's pretty amazing. That he just sort of decided to, and I think they did a trip to UK in Britain, England,
Hmm.
and came back after I think he saw Pam Brown, their park there, and decided that I'm gonna go home and do the same thing. And just watch him run a business and do that, and like his entrepreneurship is just amazing. I love seeing that. Yours, Lauren, is the same way. I love seeing
Thank
what
you.
you do and things like this, and the things that you put together. The first time I heard that you were speaking at the Pennsylvania in Scranton at the international conference, I was
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, she's on the ball!" Like killing it. Super impressive. So
Just have to put my neck out there sometimes. I usually overextend myself a little bit too much, but hopefully this year I'll keep it
so you're still kicking in.
narrowed down to the exhibitions. Um, as far as like your practice and content, have you pretty much like stayed within the same like organic shapes and all of those systems and stuff that you talk about in your artist statement, or has it sort of morphed over the years?
It's evolving. I mean, my website is sort of like the last series that I really focus on with those twisty systems and stuff like that. The flatter forms, like I did at Hilmsen in Germany, I think those were the first two that I started making of that series.
Hmm.
Have been a little bit more about um, I don't want to call it necessarily spiritual, but I guess it is. I'm not really like a religious person or anything like that, but I think there is sort of like this spirit that we have all together as a unit that sort of focuses on things. And um, those forms, basically, as they started in a simpler form, um, was basically these flatter forms with holes in them that you look through, and then that grid that covers them and supports them at
Hmm.
the same time. I think what I was trying to do is uplift that form enough to where it becomes like an oculus in a way that you look through that hole. Not necessarily that it provides light, but I guess it would if you think of it as enlightenment, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, but how I look at it is a three part of the form, and there's like the whole, there's the form itself on the perimeter, I guess, and then around the form, and those become almost, if you want to get into the spirituality and sort of like the Trinity, you've got three parts. And how I think about those things is like a way to sort of think about life in general. Is like you there's never a way to focus on one thing. You know, I've got my career as a sculptor, artist, a maker, whatever you want to call that. And then I've got, my family, and then I've got my, how do I sustain myself, my job, and that's teaching. And just learning about how to balance those things is so difficult. You
Right.
really can focus on one at a time, and one will be better than the other. And I think it will always be that way. But finding that equilibrium sometimes is difficult. I'm fortunate to have a wife and family that so supports me in a way that they get it, and my wife's an artist as well. She's a graphic designer, and I get it. She's got a great job where she gets to travel. She works for Pearson. She gets to travel, or she was traveling pre-COVID. Um, at least maybe a week or 2 weeks out of the month.
Wow.
And, you know, great. I support her all 100%. And I think, she does me the same. And I think it's important, again, finding balance. And that was a lucky balance that I found. And unfortunately,
Right.
she puts up with me. Let's put it that way.
Do you have a home studio or just like a like office or garage that you work out of, or is it mostly at school?
Well, this room that I'm working out of here is just mostly, it's like a bonus room in the house. We just bought a house just recently, and I do have like a pretty good sized garage outside, uh, um, not connected to the house. It's
Nice.
sort of, so like a 30 by 40. It's a pretty nice one. I'm still insulating it and stuff like that, and I've
Hmm.
got equipment in there. Um, COVID has really sort of changed just being able to
Right.
work continuously on projects. I mean, during the summer, I was really focused on trying to prepare for classes and just dwelling on
Hmm.
preparing for classes. I think a bigger part of it. I mean, I got some stuff done. I'm still sort of catching up as I go along and stuff, but um, it was definitely a sort of a game changer for it, sort of, or for me, to start thinking about that, and how we're gonna, what kind of projects can be hybrid, what kind of projects
Hmm.
can be at home, what kind of projects should I do at school just in case things happen and we go back to
Right.
like all those things, and but also giving the students an experience that is worth it. And I feel, as I said in the MSA panel talk that we had a few weeks ago, is I feel like, having students work at home is, I mean, there's a double edge. It's a great thing because they're learning to do it on their own at home,
Hmm.
but at the same time, they don't get the experience they would in a lab,
Right.
which is facilitated with the things that, that's in most sculpture labs. If the bare minimum that they got some of the space and a light amount of equipment to work with, but even if it's hand tools, but when you've got those facilities just sitting there while everybody else is away, I feel like, they're not getting their dollars worth in a way. And I'm really sort of pro student. I want my students to succeed. I want them to learn all these things, and sometimes a little a little rush to things or whatever to get them to learn. But at least, like, I feel like I'm doing them good if I have them in the class versus at
Hmm.
home right now.
Yeah.
Though at the same time, I can say that my students did fairly well last at the last half of the semester last year, or last semester. Um, I feel like I've done a lot of pre-planning enough that, that I've been able to keep some things online all the time for them, and they were always expected to. Uh, I would share them, my folders and stuff like that, on the cloud, that for the class, and it was sort of like their book. That's where their handouts would be. That's where their slideshows would be. So if they ever needed to go back and not necessarily hear me walk through the slideshow, but they would be able to see the slideshow,
Hmm.
see what I had there. So sort of content was sort of a hybrid. I don't know if exactly a hybrid, but they always had access to that anyway. So going
Right.
the switch over really traumatic. It just there was a few things that I had to change up. I mean,
Mhm.
demos and stuff like that. Some of the demos I felt like made it a lot easier because I could really just sort of focus on it. I could edit things and I could add
Right.
captions. And I had those abilities already, so because I'd already created some of those things before. But I feel like that I was more prepared than other people would have been for that when they're used to just doing it in the classroom.
Mhm.
And I think I've got some faculty um, that support me. One faculty member just the other day sort of said, I want to do what you do. And I was like, wow, that made me feel really good because I thought you hated what I do. But it wasn't too bad, but definitely like something to a game changer for us all.
For sure. Do you, so you think that this semester's going a little bit smoother than just like being dropped off in the middle of quarantine and having to quickly change over, or
Well, I'm face to face. I'm lucky right now, so
okay,
nothing has changed back or changed to going home or anything like that. And I'm not doing a hybrid class. I expect the students to be in class, and
hmm,
I'm working with them. I am providing videos and stuff like that to help sustain things because they can go back and look at those things, which is
right,
it just seems it's important even without the worry head of COVID over our head and stuff like that, because they can go back and review it. Because I think in our studio situations, yeah, we do a demo and then we leave, and then it's left up to them to make all the mistakes they're going to make.
right,
And at the same time, I think those mistakes are important. They're learning, but at the same time, for success, and I'm a big proponent of success for the students because look at it as a marketing thing. If they succeed, they're going to come back,
hmm,
and or at least hope they or I've worked them to death, whichever way. But I feel like that's important, and I think the video footage that we're doing already. I mean, I know faculty that are teaching face to face, and they're also doing the same where they've got the videos on. And I walked by the ceramics room today and hear one of the other professors talking, and they weren't in there. It was like a kid on their laptop watching the video to see how their thing was done. So they need those resources, and I think it's good coming from a familiar face. A lot of things are online, and I think those are great. People are making videos and sharing them and stuff, but there's something different about that face to face, and then also that recording of that face to face
hmm,
that you're comfortable with your professor enough to like you can walk up and say, "What did you mean by that?"
right,
David, what did you mean when you said that? and then they get it much better because they couldn't do that with the other video.
hmm,
So I think it's a lesson for us all. And maybe I think it too is going to be a changer for how we teach in the future. I think we'll be learning to prepare differently than what we used to prepare for
right.
classes.
That's something that I'd already been sort of morphing to in my classes, was actually starting to do some demos or like reiterations of how to like ink blocks or carving techniques or whatever, because I mostly teach printmaking. And I saw a vast majority of my students have to stop asking me the same repetitive question over like how to clean up or how to, do different techniques, just by having those videos online beforehand. And that was like a year and a half ago. And so it's definitely, because I have some students that aren't coming to class at all because of the family members, and
Right.
I'm letting them do it hybrid. So all of my lectures and stuff are online. And so far, I mean, we're 2 weeks in, so knock on wood, nothing too crazy
Yeah,
happens. But
I've got a couple that that I've been in contact with, and they seem like they're doing fine as far as what they're telling me and stuff. And there's some that are even doing other things. Um, that they're learning differently than the other class
mhm,
do because I'm not right there with them. So that's just things that I think we're going to learn how to teach that as well. I mean, I think it's going to be different. I'm a little bit concerned though, that the bureaucracy of the university is going to expect us to do it all the time next.
right.
So that's the scary part. Because I think, again, I still feel pretty strongly that our students need to be in class with us so we can have that dialogue and have that community that I think that strengthens who we are as artists. Because I feel like me finding the iron community that I did, you guys, was something that I was looking for at the end of grad school because I always found like ceramics at University of Iowa. There was a big community. You know,
Oh yeah.
everybody makes their ceramic greenware and stuff like that. Hand building. We had Israel Davis doing screen printing on ceramic forms and stuff like that, and pushing them into press molds. Then you had like traditional potters. See, the whole game. Everybody was doing their own thing, or whatever. But then they all came together with in the wood fire or with
Right.
it was this big community. It's just that's the thing that I loved about ceramics that I missed out that I
Mhm.
felt was missing in sculpture, or at least in my school. And finding that community was pretty awesome because it is just that. It's like everybody makes their own things at home and then or wherever, and then they bring all the parts and check making molds, or we bring all the molds and then we pour together and then we hang out together, we sweat together, we all the ups and all the downs we've got
Right.
along with it before. It's pretty awesome to have that and I feel like the same thing happens in our classroom. I tell my students all the time, it's like even in 3D design, like, I'm not the only teacher here. Your peers are part of your learning environment too. You're learning from each other.
Mhm.
There's things that I tell one student that understands it quite well. The other student doesn't understand what I meant. Um, other kids, when they have a dialogue together, they start understanding together. Um, um, I never tell them that, when you're looking over somebody to see how they're doing it and steal their ideas, or not steal their idea, but steal their technique maybe or something like that. That's not stealing. That's learning. And I
Right.
think it's so important because, like if you got a class of 15 students, you've got 15 people, that's me too, to work off of and develop that idea and or develop the way that you make your work or
Mhm.
the idea too. And I think that's pretty amazing. And if they understand that in the beginning, they'll be able to continue that after those practices afterwards, finding that community that supports what they do and
Right.
understands what they talk about too, because I think that's the other thing, I've got family members that don't know why I do what I do. That's normal.
Yep.
uh, I'm not normal, but, uh, but I think, that's just the thing. It's like they learn to create a dialogue together and, I'm older. These kids are younger. They have a completely different atmosphere that they've grown up in.
Mhm.
They're what they watched on TV, what they streamed on TV now, I guess more or less. Um, how they talk, how they think, and all those things are different from what we grew up with, and that's going to keep changing every
Mhm.
generation. It will evolve and go there. And there's things you find similarities too. You always find that one kooky kid that likes 70s and 80s music. Oh man.
Yep, always. Have you had any students, and I know I was guilty of this too when I was an undergrad, but they consider like using tracing paper or projectors or anything like that to like enlarge or sketch or something, they consider it cheating.
I think it's
And
a technique. Yeah,
mhm.
that's just a technique. It's a way of doing things, and we're not all visual people that we can look at something and remake it. So go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, no, go ahead,
Yeah,
because
basically that. I teach those things. I mean,
mhm,
like I even use the computer to help do things. I've got a positive negative project. It's on my website from some of the projects where I do a portrait. They do a self portrait of themselves. Well, I'll be self portrait. But the idea is that basically I tell them they can do it by eye, or they can we can run this through Photoshop, and we can change it to black and white to
mhm,
like just and change it to the threshold to where it's absolute blacks and gray, just black and white, so positive and negative space. And then we'll take that, and that's okay to enlarge it. We're gonna take it into Illustrator, and we're gonna enlarge it, and then what you're going to do, and we're going to print that out. And then I got
right,
so we're putting it out on like 11 by 17, but I want them to go like 25 by 30 or something, bigger, and they can go that whatever size it is. So then we're printing it out on 3 pieces of paper. They're learning how to line that up.
mhm,
These are techniques that I actually learned in screen printing to make a larger image.
right,
And then basically, then they have to transfer that to cardboard, and then they have to cut out to where the corrugated parts are exposed and the other The skin part is just left alone, and it's a positive negative on a new material. And that whole the whole class, if they follow that, they're not really sort of doing everything by eye, but they're learning a lot of skills
Hmm.
to develop those things. And the thing is too, they can, as they're tracing it back to the cardboard, they can come back and, you know, edit, change a line and stuff like that before they
Right.
trace it in the image, and like they can, give their own aesthetic to it if they want. But they learn so many skills that way, and I think a lot of our kids, and not to sort of degrade what's happening in the school systems, but I think they are. I mean, we do have a lot of schools that don't teach a lot of art. They're not, or especially with the idea of STEM rather than STEAM in schools, just relatively um, not too long ago. I think it's still engaged into now. They're not getting those skills, and
Hmm.
really, we're teaching a generation sometimes that haven't had enough art classes to understand what they're doing. I still have students that like they're scratching their head when I talk about simple things.
Right.
Uh, I often say that I've got students that don't know how to drive a nail into a piece of wood with a hammer. Like they don't know how to use a hammer. Which to me, I grew up in my backyard building
Yep.
stuff. So I learned to use a hammer, but these kids aren't. I mean, they're pushing buttons and playing games, and
Hmm.
they don't have the same kind of environments that I did. I mean, I grew up in a farm community, so labor wasn't that strange to me.
Right.
Having chores and stuff like that, where I was working outside some a lot, and not all of our kids are can do that. They can't say that they lived in the city. They may have lived in an apartment all their life. They're coming to a sculpture area and like all these familiar noises and sounds and smells and like, does that smell okay? Oh yeah, that's fine. That's just somebody burning something in the
Yep.
but they do, and it's a strange world for them. So like I don't think we're doing an injustice by teaching those things. Obviously, I think in our drawing classes they're gonna learn that stuff. In my classes, we don't get all of that, and
Hmm.
not to say that we don't do a lot of representational work from observation. I mean, I've got portrait classes where they work with clay, and it's kind of hard to cheat that. I mean, there's the ways that you can sort of help yourself along the way, but cheating as far as when you start putting that clay on, it becomes a very tactile experience.
Yep.
Too
It's
much,
very
too
different.
little, too much, too little, yada yada yada. So
Yep.
it's not a cheat; it's a technique. So
That's what I've been telling him because, like, I had one guy come in and he was like, I can use Illustrator to, like, posterize or change the gradients and stuff. I'm like, absolutely. Like, I encourage that, especially with graphic designers or whatever that have their own style going on. Like, please bring that in because it'll make your life a whole lot easier getting from point A to point B for sure.
and the only thing about that, I guess, is if you wanted to go into cheating, is just copyright and
Hmm.
copyright issues. So if they're using photographs from somebody else's photography and stuff like that, and Shepard Fairey got in this
Right.
the model campaign. Um, but at the same time, for our students, it's a learning experience. It's
Hmm.
not, if they're not selling it and stuff like that, they're learning with these things. So I'm not sort of like saying that they should steal the portraiture or photography and stuff like that, but it's probably a better investment if they sort of get their own photography. And
Hmm.
that's what I do with my classes when they're doing a self portrait. They're taking whatever selfie or something like that and using that. So they're using their own. But I talk about Sherpa Fairies in that
Oh, yeah.
that project, and Bansky as well. Both of those are like using those type of those stencil type things. And I've had students that knew Illustrator and Photoshop better than I did come in and like they did multi layers of color and stuff like that with the cardboard project. And I said, well, okay, you're not supposed to color the cardboard, but you can find colored cardboard. You can find so and they would do that, but they would have different layers and different colors that I just didn't know how to pull it off like they did.
Nice. That's cool.
And I think that's good too. Is like the thing about I tell my students, is I'm still learning. I don't know
Hmm.
everything. I don't use these tools all the time. That I've got it down pat. And some of the kids have they got new ideas, and I love the ideas they have. And sometimes the most frustrating part is like, wow, that kid had a great idea. They just left the semester. I know that kid's not going to come back to sculpture, but gosh, he does not know what he's leaving
Right.
behind.
Right.
Yeah,
I've
or
seen
she.
that
I
a
mean, like
lot. Speaking of new or like things that you might not have had experience with before, how did you get introduced to the 3D printing? And was it difficult to, like, because you were probably making everything by hand previously, did you get like blocks as you were going along, like transforming your pieces into 3D printing?
I took Maya classes when I was in graduate school, so I had a lot of the foundation for building
Okay.
some building basic. I mean, really basic. I
Hmm.
only took one semester, so I didn't have it all down. But building forms and stuff like that. And I had a great teacher. I cannot remember his name, but he really made it competitive. I mean, he made it to where like he and I do some similar things. I like posting my students' work and stuff like that on Facebook and stuff like that, so people can see what I'm doing or what they're doing. Um, but he would do something similar. He had a place where he would stash the top 10 of the class. And we started out with, I think we started out with 60 in this lab, maybe even more in the class. He
Uh,
said, by next week, this will be half the class. Like half of you will be scared off from this class. And I was one that stuck it out. And it was true. I mean, it really sort of like cut half pretty quickly. But like I said, he would post the top 10 of the class online somewhere where we could see it. And I wanted that spot. And I always made it a goal to be that. And I wasn't always that spot. I really tried hard to be that spot. And it was just like, that class was so much like sculpture or any art class. You have to put in the time out of
oh
class.
yeah.
And basically, he had it set up where we had a specific time that we scheduled a computer, and we would come in and use that computer at our designated time, and
Hmm.
then we had to leave. The next person was coming in right after, so it was really competitive that way too. That you had to make sure that you were at your slot, or you weren't going to get your homework done. Um, but I, I, I fought it out with some really amazing people that were working with Maya to build some forms, and 3D printing wasn't really anything then. That was a 2001, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know if MakerBot was doing anything then. Maybe it could have been. Um, but anyway, that was my first sort of, and I was into architecture too before I got into art. And I wasn't doing anything on computer then, but I was doing everything by hand drafting. So like I had a lot of that 3D experience to develop into what you would do in model to go into 3D printing. And I was looking forward to seeing 3D modeling or 3D printing happening.
Hmm.
Um, I was able to, as far as changing over to 3D printing and starting, I wrote so where was my first experience 3D printing? It may have been just seeing people online doing stuff, and then I wrote a grant for the Kentucky Arts Council
Nice.
and awarded enough funding that I could, buy me a 3D printer and stuff, and then got a MakerBot Replicator 2 and learned to use it, and that began that that twist. And it was at the almost the same time that I was going to trails and working with Jim Wade and others, and building my forms that way, the same kind of forms. And what I was doing there is like some of my I kept as PLA and ABS.
Hmm.
Others I cast. PLA you can sort of cast. So basically, I sort of just gated up and cast it that way on a smaller scale. And that was just investment casting. And what I had to do with it as far as complexity, I had to make rubber molds for each of my parts, and
Oh
then
wow.
wax weld them together. So I think it's a really versatile tool. You can do a lot with it. Um, what I really like about it, and I haven't done my own creations of this, is building forms like a skull or something like that,
Hmm.
where you have all those inclusions and stuff like that on the inside of forms, those hollow spaces. But I did take one of the skulls that MakerBot had on their Thingiverse, that site. It was a Tyrannosaurus Rex, T-Rex, and basically took that skull, and it was just maybe really small. So I don't know if you can really sort of gauge scale here, but anyway, had those inclusions because when you print it, you're printing the inside and the outside at the same time,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
you clean it out. So, but to to do that with a rubber mold would be pretty difficult, especially with all those thin layers of like a bone or something like
Hmm.
that. You couldn't pull it off as easy. But when you print it and burn out that PLA in an investment mold, you get it all. You get all that inside, and yeah, it's really sort of
That's
nice
wild.
for that. So building in that environment that way, I can see a lot of advantages for artists and stuff like that if they're thinking about those things. And
Hmm.
obviously, it all depends on what you're thinking conceptually. There's lots of different avenues that we can sort of work with that one.
That's cool. Because, like, I don't think I'd even really heard about it until like late in my undergrad. It was like 2015 or something, and I was just starting to mess around with CNC plasma cutters and stuff, and it was crazy how advanced everything has come in such a short amount of time, really.
Yeah, and I think too. In my undergrad, I got a BFA in graphic design, so I've always been really interested in computers. My first computer was um, a Commodore 64 computer, and I was making just dot art, basically like pointillism almost in a way, of making things like I remember just copying like Spider Man from Todd McFarlane's comic books and beer cans and silly things like that. When I was in high school, and I worked all summer one year to buy my own computer. I didn't grow up with a lot of money or anything like that. And I remember getting on, I guess, did we call it Wi-Fi then? I don't. Yeah,
Broadband and
I had a modem and it made all those crazy sounds when you were trying to get online and stuff.
hmm
And but I was building stuff then on the computer, and it just sort of inkled into coming to school and finding my way. I started out in architecture, then went undeclared. Probably had a 5-year program going on there for school, and then made my way into the art department. And Ivan Schieferdecker was the person that talked to me. He's actually an Iowa grad too. He studied under Lasansky, printmaker at Iowa, and I remember walking down the hall with him as my advisor, and he said, "Well, if you want to make money, son, in art or in art, you probably want to go graphic design." So he went graphic design, and I finished that BFA in graphic design, and so I've been working with computers quite a bit, and that just sort of fell right into the 3D printing market. I've always been sort of both on both sides of like doing 2D art with Adobe products now, and then also with Maya and other things that have been tinkering around with. I mean, I looked at Blender for a while. I've looked at
hmm
Mesh Mixer. Even though I say it's an easy one to use, I've not used it enough to sort of be involved with it. Right now, Shaper 3D has been
Okay.
pretty pretty fun to use, but it's not like some of the tools like where you can sort of use a putty like form and start out
Right.
with start adjusting things. It's more like that Maya type rigid forms and stuff like that. I mean, you can obviously build more complex forms
hmm
there, but when you're first starting, it's really simple blocky things you're doing. So, but yeah, that graphic design experience really sort of led me into keeping with the tech part. Uh,
Nice. Okay, I won't hold you too much longer. We're at 6:45 now. I have one final question. If there was anything that you know now that you wished you had known as an emerging artist or a young professor, what would you tell yourself?
uh, that's a hard one. I mean, I'm a big seller of like preparing my students for their portfolios and stuff like that, and that's part of some of the things like I said before, like that I do online. Um, is just preparing yourself in that way. Like document your work regardless. Learn to document your work
Mhm.
regardless. I mean, some of the work that you document may not be important, but for me, what I did do for my students going into they're finishing their career or their college career, they're planning ahead and they don't even know it. And I think that really takes the teacher to sort of to motivate them to do it.
Right.
But documenting their work, learning to document their work, etc. I didn't learn that until the very end. I'm like, all right, I decided that I'm going to go to graduate school, and okay, what do I got to do? You need to get photographs of your work, get a portfolio made so you can apply to school. All right, so I got to get all my pieces that I chucked somewhere and hopefully had all that was there, and then apply to school. And I don't know, I don't know. I guess the other thing too. I mean, that's preparedness more or less than anything. But um, be what's the word I'm looking at? Be ambitious. Don't worry about what people say. Be courageous. Be confident. I don't know if I was always a confident person back when I was a kid, and it's hard. I mean, you're growing up, you're put in the middle of a bunch of other people and asked to sort of talk about stuff that
Right.
you don't know. uh, but you have, I think, stay on that path of being confident and courageous about what you do, and don't let anything get in your way. Yeah, sometimes I listen to your teachers, but at the same time, you've got to choose your own path, and sometimes your teacher's looking for that. We're just going to tell you what we know, but you know different things. Like I said, our students know more about their culture than we know about their culture because we grew up in our culture, our time.
Right.
I mean, it seems like really close, like sometimes just 10 years apart, but that's still a big deal.
Oh yeah.
This way different. We've matured differently than they have, and we are mature. They're sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I act like um, I think the just to have that confidence to be open minded to say what you want to do, and allow your teacher to be able to be in there and help you out with the work, because sometimes there's a resistance. I remember being resistant to what the teacher offered. I'm going to do it my way or do it this way, and then okay, then I failed and then I have to do it again. And then sometimes I didn't though. Sometimes there was times like, okay, I've got my idea of what this means. Even up in grad school, there was times um, that somebody would tell me to do it a certain way, but I had certain people that would tell me that, all right, no, you need to do it this way. But then I had other faculty that said, no, he's let him focus on it
Hmm.
this way and let him do it. And I think we're going to get a mixed bag all the time of teachers that sort of push you in different directions and stuff like that. And you got to guide your own path. I mean, you're the boss of that, but take the wisdom that suits what you need to do for your career. Um, the other thing too is be open. I mean, these are all like convoluted. I mean, they're almost like like one thing is like me sort of being schizophrenic here. It's like I'll say, don't listen to your teacher, but don't listen to your teacher.
Right.
It's really difficult,
It's a
but
double-edged sword for sure.
it is. But one thing that I also learned too is don't be so bold that you think you're the only one
Right.
that should know it all. Um, I'm I was told at one point by an instructor that that he would never, like I said something that, like, well, I tell the students that I don't know how to do that. I'm okay with that. He said, oh, you never tell the students that you don't know how to do anything. Why not? I don't know how to do it. Let's learn it together.
Hmm.
I think that should be the attitude, is like, let's figure this out together. Because like in art and sculpture, definitely there's a lot of problem solving, and like I think that's what, again, come back to that community of artists that we have with iron casting, is that we have a group of people that, some have done it, some haven't. I've heard Jerry like say, well, I've never seen anybody do it that way. But let's see if it works. Like
Hmm.
there's no hesitance. Let's see if it'll happen.
Let's
Let's see if
do
it
it.
let's do it. Yeah, exactly. But that's pretty awesome that, that we have to be that kind of person, that we're open minded enough to allow things to come in and try something different. Again, I'm going. There's another class I did a while back. It's been quite a while back. Is I offered the students to like do this project with me, and I said I've never done it before, and I had so much low motivation from them because I said I don't know if it's going to work. And when I said that I know it's not going to work, I think they just shut down. It was really like
Yeah.
one of my worst semesters, or worst class sessions anyway, or class projects. And I was just really sort of like, what happened? Like, why wouldn't you want to try something new? And like, it's not going to like, that's the whole idea of like, when I think about sciences and stuff like that, it's like, if you don't find a new way to do something, why struggle with, I mean, why keep doing it the old way when you can find new ways to do it
Right.
and improve it, or maybe come up with a whole new idea. Why is there such a fear of risk? So be a risk taker. That's
Hmm.
the biggest thing I think that we can all do. And with both of those, you take a risk by choosing the path of this instructor, you take a risk, or you take a risk by taking your own, and
Right.
you're going to lead your path and you're going to find your way. But be confident that you've always got the backing of those instructors, most likely, that even if you fail, they're going to be right there with you. They
Hmm.
may give you a raking or may give you a chewing, but still they're right there with you. They may have said, I told you so.
Yeah, for sure.
Be a risk taker, be confident.
Hmm. That's one of the things that I've been doing for the past couple of semesters is I actually make the final project experimental. I'm like, okay, here, I've showed you all the traditional techniques. Now break all the rules. And
Yeah.
I usually get some really cool stuff from that, and it's a lot of fun seeing what they come up with for sure. And they get to like experience doing a proposal and like how are you going to get to this point and stuff like that. So it's really cool.
And I think that's one of the best things about having different teachers in your education
Hmm.
is that you're going to get different ideas and you're going to get different ways of people. You're going to click with this teacher, that teacher, and stuff like
Right.
that. And to have that variety, I mean, even when I talk about artist statements and writing artist statements, I'll say, so and so is going to tell you how to write this way, and they'll come to me. So, well, so and so tells me they'll tell me to write this way, and I said, well, so and so can tell you that. I'm going to tell you how to write this way, but when you leave here, you're going to write your way.
Right.
It, you just I want you to follow these this rubric. This is the way you got to follow it, and they eventually get it, and I'm proud of I'm proud of the end. I think and I hope they are too,
Hmm.
because what they've learned is like it's not always one way to do it. You need to break the rules, like you said, and that might be breaking their rules. It might be breaking my. It might be breaking both of our rules,
Right.
but at least you've learned something from us by doing what we've given you, and you're taking it your way and making it
Hmm.
a new thing. And that's the thing I was saying, talking about before. Is like you're going to make it a new idea, a new thing that sort of comes through.
Right.
And I think they're still afraid. Again, sometimes there's a lot of fear of that. So,
Oh yeah. Gotta get past the fear. Well, thank you so much, David. I hope you have a good evening and say hello to everybody. And
well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you were able to help me out and fill in a spot.
Have
Thanks so much. Have a good evening.
a good day.
Bye.